Alright, I just got out of seeing Rambo Last Blood, and well, that's one way to end a franchise. It certainly doubles down, or at least equals the violence in Rambo 4, the last one. But obviously, this is the most recent and presumably final movie in the Rambo franchise, which has gotten progressively further away from its relatively realistic and political roots into just kind of a one-size-fits-all insane action series, which I'm not complaining about. There are some people that are complaining about that. It's very much paint by numbers, though. It's clear that Stallone was involved in this. It looks like it was his production company that was at the helm, and I would have to imagine that after coming back over, I think like a decade after even that last one that was a revival after, whatever, 10, 15 years or so, for her to come back to this project, it must have been something about it that he was interested in, even if it was just a paycheck. But it's a very straightforward movie. It's Rambo living in, I believe, Arizona, in that home that you see him go back to at the end of the last movie. And he started a family at some point, or became sort of a surrogate father to a young Mexican woman. And I think her aunt or great aunt or something. It's not really clear when this happened. There's some pictures and some showing exposition in the beginning that kind of indicates that maybe this is something that he sort of found his way into after the last movie, after he came back from overseas. But in any case, he's home on the range, so to speak, and just riding horses, taking pills like old guys do. His surrogate daughter wants to go find her real dad, and it turns out he's a jerk, and she ends up getting kidnapped or taken by these cartel guys, and without too many spoilers, things don't really go very well. And the last half, or the last third of the movie, is just Rambo basically doing what I'm sure you've seen in the trailers and what everyone else has sort of called it, as R-rated Home Alone, which I'm a sucker for in The Equalizer and Skyfall and any of those other movies where someone's just basically doing tower defense IRL. And here, like I said, it's intense. I mean, that's definitely what they're counting on the movie hinging on, because everything else that happens before then is just very familiar. It's more so than any of the other Rambo movies. It's very much leaning into a more modern old guy action movie trend, your Liam Neeson movies and all that kind of stuff. It pretty much is just taken in the beginning. There's a scene that's pretty much you were never really here with a hammer, except without any of the gravitas or calm realization of what it would be like for a person to actually do this. The whole movie is kind of like that. It's just little scenes that you saw in other movies that were kind of done better. The only thing that really makes it distinct is Sylvester Stallone in the lead role, which obviously he's cultivated his character over so long, and there are moments where you have the references to his past and his monologues about the troubles he's been through and all of that, and that is somewhat distinct, and obviously the legacy of his character is kind of transcends film and is sort of like a pop cultural icon, for better or worse. But I just don't know if this is the right fit for especially a send-off of the character. Again, I know some people have made a hullabaloo about it being the politics of it and whatever, and I think that's a little bit silly, because I don't think it's xenophobic. I mean, the main character that you're sympathizing with is Hispanic, and a good amount of the characters in the supporting cast, and it's not Mexican. I think it's anti-cartel or anti-sex trafficker. It's just a little bit silly. It's like you can't really deny that these kinds of people exist, and in these other movies he's been taking out baddies in other countries. I mean, predominantly Asia, but I mean it was Russians in 3, and I don't know. I mean, I think people are seeing stuff that isn't really there just because of kind of the climate that we're in, and it never really comes up in the movie. It's not really relevant, so I think that's actually for the best. As far as it just being a violent action movie, I wouldn't want all movies to be like that, but it's definitely something that sticks in your head, which helps when the rest of the movie is relatively forgettable. People get killed in this movie. I mean, capital K. I mean, heads are getting knocked off, crushed. People are getting taking shotguns to the back of the head. It's wild. I was sitting next to some old ladies at the theater, which was a little unusual, but there was 1 or 2 times where I was a little self-conscious about some of the noises that I was making while seeing Rambo taking people out. It's pretty much a horror movie for the last third, except you're rooting for the slasher. Like I said, there's also the scene where he's taking people out with a hammer, and then one point where I don't know, I think what he did was he hit a guy with the butt of a gun so hard that it broke part of his chest, and then he started pulling on the rib or something. I don't know, that kind of made my gorge rise a little bit. There's not really a whole lot else to say about this movie. The look of it isn't anything to write home about. There's some decent establishing shots of what I assume are on location in parts of Mexico and the American South, but most of it takes place indoors or in the last part in this tunnel system that Rambo's built on his farm, but he has, and just stick around for that end part, and that's pretty much what I think everyone's paying a ticket for. It's just kind of middle of the road. It's something where if you like these kinds of movies, which I do, you can definitely go see it. But I mean, if you have any personal convictions about what this character is supposed to be from the book or from the movies, I know obviously the author understandably has not thrilled with the way that this has sort of capped the franchise. And if you feel like you kind of want something more unique, then don't worry about it. It's pretty much what you would expect from the poster, from the trailer, from everything, and that can be said for a lot of movies, but here, especially with this kind of action movie, it's very much going through the motions, and those motions are pretty impressive to watch if you like revenge movies, if you like old man action movies, or whatever, and just kind of seeing that whole thing play out, which I do, on the weekend, but it's nothing that you necessarily have to rush out to see. Overall, I would give it a 5 out of 10, and I mean that in the sense of a true average, which is just, it doesn't really do anything extraordinary, but it's not, egregiously bad. It's just right there. So probably better than John Rambo, but not as good as any of the other ones, but that's Last Blood.